It's 7 a.m., August 16th, 2023, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
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 Allison is absent. Rachel.
Here.
Yeah.
Here.
Here.
We have a quorum. First item of business this morning is Public Improvement 9502, which is a project relating to the old wastewater treatment plant demolition project, and we'll call on our city engineer, Brian Navarro. Good morning, Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor, and Met Council members. Yes, the memo before you is in regards to Public Improvement 9502. This is demolition of the old wastewater treatment plant that's located just west of Pisgah Dam. Interstate Engineering has substantially completed the project plans and specifications. The estimated probable construction cost for phase one is $582,000. Phase two, estimated cost about $615,000 for a total combined demolition cost of nearly $1.2 million. Because of this, we must publicly advertise for bids. If you recall, Otter Tail Power submitted a letter of intent to the city with intentions of acquiring the northerly property of this old wastewater site to construct a new substation. They're projecting to start this new substation in spring 2024. Upon the completion of the substation, they'll be doing a lot of infrastructure removal, including the Buse Street substation as part of this project. But due to potential costs, we decided best to bid the project two phases. If you turn to the screen right there, phase one basically was the northern portion of this property, which is pretty consistent with Otter Tail Power's needs. Phase two is to the south, which is pretty much the remaining that is not needed or requested by Otter Tail Power. However, we want to take advantage and see what the current market is producing on demolition projects. So if acceptable, we're looking to take bids here in September. I'm hoping, actually, if we get favorable bids, to also have the draft purchase agreement to help steer the conversation during the award recommendation if we get competitive bids for this project. So at this time, I'm requesting accept the project plans and specifications and authorization to advertise for bids. And I'll open up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Brian. We can bring this to the council on Monday night through a motion, and then we can have any discussions. Scott, Anthony, thank you.
Yep.
Questions for Brian? All in favor of bringing this to the council on Monday night, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. A motion carries.
Thank you.
Brian. Brian Navarro, again, on item number 2, Minnesota State Active Transportation Infrastructure Program.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just give a little history. Back in October of 2022, City Council motioned and authorizing staff to submit a letter of intent for the 2022 Minnesota State Active Transportation Program. We finished the application and submitted it by the due date at the time. In April, I informed the council that we were unsuccessful and our application was denied. A total 81 applications were submitted and only 9 projects were submitted at that time. Just this past month, MnDOT notified me indicating additional funds were allocated to this program. And I've included the letter, but the city has been awarded a total amount requested of $391,960. If you look in your packet, I've attached a letter along with some application guidelines or program guidelines, along with, I believe it was 5 candidates at the time, including the cost estimates that composed the request of that money. I just want to note on the budget too, there's only specific construction costs that are eligible for these expenses. As noted, landscape features, planters, anything ornamental, decorative features are not eligible, along with engineering and construction administration and inspection, right-of-way acquisition. Those are all local costs. Therefore, if you also look in the last page of the recap, we're estimating the local share, knowing this, is about $71,250. We have not determined funding sources for our share of this program at this time. So therefore, in the interim, we'll work on trying to find some potential funding options and present to the council, along with the final AT grant agreement once that becomes available. So at this time, I'm just requesting to initiate Public Improvement 5361 and authorization requesting MnDOT to prepare the final active transportation grant agreement. So I'll open up to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Brian.
I'll make the motion. I got a question.
Sure.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Anthony.
On the On this grant, when would be the deadline for usage? I mean, can it roll to next year?
Yes, correct. And that,
So at least then we don't have to try and get it done this fall or anything crazy.
no, I believe I got to look at the initial requirements. It was 2023 or 2024, so we're hopeful in 2024. But we'll get confirmation with the state on that.
Yeah, Scott.
Bill, where would the mansion funds come from, you think?
So we've looked at this a little bit. I mean, when this was originally applied for, you know, we were under the impression, we were told as a city that there was no matching requirements. And then it did come out that the engineering and things Brian had said. You know, I started looking, you know, we have some trail and path funds, not 71,000 accumulated, maybe 30,000 if I remember, but that's for maintenance of our current trails. So I was looking at that. I also did put an email out to the school district to see what their interest is. We haven't connected on that yet, since a lot of this is by the school, so we'd like to talk to them a little bit. And then we'll have to talk to the tax levy committee too as well, because like Anthony
my
said,
question.
this could go to next year. Is this something we budget in for that? So at this time, we don't have a cash balance designated for this. A lot of this is sidewalk related, which is related to streets, of course. And I don't know if we have an appetite to pull from our seal coat budget that we're carrying forward to next year. So I kind of doubt it, but, so that's some of our dilemma on that. So thinking out loud there.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks. We have a, so to ask the question then, if we accept the grant or have the MnDOT prepare the final grant agreement and for some reason there's not matching funds, then we just don't accept final delivery of the grant, is that right? If the project doesn't happen?
That'd be correct.
Okay.
I think the one thing though that we should look at, particularly, you know, the one at the high school, I think that one is probably a more critical one, and then maybe that's the other question is, you know, can we take a portion of it as opposed to all of it? You know, obviously there was 4 items, and maybe a question back to MnDOT. You know, can we a la carte the menu? Because we got rejected the first time, and obviously we've moved on. Now we've got it, but we don't have the funds to match 100%. So maybe the question of MnDOT is, can we pick and choose and only receive a portion of the grant?
Sure. Other questions for Brian? We have a motion to bring this to the council on Monday night. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is a HRA levy tax request for 2024, and we'll call on Michael Olson of the HRA. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Mike Olson. I'm the Executive Director with the Fergus Falls HRA. And I'm here this morning asking for your approval for our tax levy. We use this tax levy primarily for our administrative costs that are not covered by HUD programming. And of course, any of our surplus dollars roll into other program areas, things like grant writing, or in our most recent case, in the development of our permanent supportive housing building, which is called Garrett's Grove, and which is currently on schedule to open late November, early December. So without digging, without rereading, I guess, the letter that I sent to the city administrator and is likely copied in your packets, I wonder this morning if anybody has any specific questions related to HRA, tax levy, or programming.
Michael, this is the usual request, right?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Not an increase.
It's an increase, but it's an increase because property values increase, and the allowable,
I understand that.
the allowable percentage that we can request is rising with those values.
Okay.
So,
But I believe it's true that you're also increasing some of the services that you're providing to the community with additional resources as well. Is that correct?
correct. One of our goals right now is to increase staffing by 1 position. As we've come through some of the issues that I think are related to the closures and COVID, what we're finding is that we have a great number of applicants and current participants who are really in need of additional assistance, whether it comes to maintaining housing or finding new housing. There's just really a lot of demand, more time it takes to get applicants to be successful participants, to maintain existing participants, and in a lot of cases to find methods to help existing participants transition into other housing models. So,
And is that still considered for those clients outside the HRA world as well, like partnering with other
absolutely.
service providers in the
Yeah,
area to be
absolutely.
that navigator, if you will?
I think
for
we're looking, I
services?
think our position would likely be, a housing navigator position is really what I'm looking for, but it could be housing case management or the two tied together. Big picture, what I want to have in our office is someone who is able and willing to help any tenant in Fergus Falls, whether it's an HRA applicant, participant, or a tenant in another unit, just to help them navigate some of the issues that come up with looking for other assistance, with finding, you name it. It could be as simple as helping someone try to locate dollars for security deposits, or to help with past dues, or to help with very oftentimes what we find is that folks are missing identifications, driver's license, social security numbers, you name it, and just unfortunately don't seem to always have the wherewithal, whether it be transportation wise or even just knowing how to renew some of those items. So yeah, looking to have someone in our office that can take those calls and help those folks really with anything related to housing.
Thanks, Michael.
I was going to say, I'll make the motion, and I have a question.
Motion to bring this to the council. Thank you, Anthony. Scott, second. Go ahead, Anthony.
I think, Michael, obviously, I think it's a positive program, and obviously, as you say, you do a lot, not just for that, but I mean, maybe you just want to speak a little bit to kind of like the loan programs that you brought dollars into the community, the low interest loans for people to equally, do up their own private homes.
Sure. So the most visible and most recently used program is a grant program offered through Minnesota DEED. It's called the Small Cities Development Program Grant. We had an extension on that. We're going through an audit on that program here just in a couple of weeks, but that's a program that we can apply for dollars for income qualifying homeowners. In this last example, it provided up to $25,000 per resident who successfully applied. It can be used for the majority of exterior items on a home. The bulk of our rehabs are siding, soffit, fascia, roofing, windows, doors. It's forgiven over a period of 10 years, 10% forgiveness per year for 10 years. So in most cases, if a resident maintains that property for those 10 years, those grant dollars are completely forgiven. There's no repayment. If the title to their home changes within that grant period, if they sell or transfer title, the remaining portion is paid back to the city and can be reloaned to another applicant for another project. So very good program. Another program that we use some of these dollars for is offered through Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. It's called the Rehab Loan Program or the Emergency Loan Program. Those funds are available all the time, and there's not a specific neighborhood that they have to be used in. As a loan officer, we're able to use those funds honestly anywhere in the state of Minnesota. We of course focus our attentions to Fergus Falls. Those loans or grants are up to $37,000 per qualified applicant, and similar situation. They cover everything from radon mitigation to roofing, windows, doors. Really, I think I want to clarify both of these programs are rehab-related programs, not remodeling-related programs. So we oftentimes have folks who would like to have new kitchens or new, more cosmetic type upgrades, and these are very strictly focused toward roofing, windows, doors, siding, furnaces, plumbing upgrades, etc. Really structural improvements. So, I guess maybe the last loan program that I should bring up that has been a little bit underutilized lately. The HRA has in the past dedicated some of these levy funds to a program that we call our rental rehab program. That's a loan program that we keep dollars in-house and make low-interest loans to landlords for qualifying improvements. I think it's $15,000 per unit available for folks up to maybe a 5-unit maximum per building, usually a 3% interest rate on a 10-year term. And again, those are loan dollars, so those are revolving funds within the HRA for the improvement of rental properties.
Thanks, Michael. Anyone have any other questions for Michael? We have a motion to bring this request to the city council on Monday night. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Michael. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, allowing goats within the city limits. Scott Kwame and Karen Terry, I know Tom Kingston's here as well, so good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and council and staff. Thank you so much for time this morning to talk about my favorite thing, which is goats. So goats are being used in a lot of places now for eating brush. That's what they're really good at. They shine at clearing brush. They are not good at eating grass. If you want something to eat grass, you need sheep. If you want something to eat brush, from anywhere from knee-high up to whatever they can reach, up to 6-7 feet high, then you get goats. So they're being used in a lot of places to remove whatever vegetation is there for a variety of reasons. Some people just want the brush to be gone so they have a view. Some people want a fire break. We're seeing this more and more out west. They're using goats to clear brush so that they have less fuel to carry fire through. And I think we're going to see more of that as time goes on. Sometimes we use them to clear things like poison ivy. Buckthorn is a really big issue in our area, and goats love to eat buckthorn. So they bring the goats in, they eat the buckthorn, whatever weeds are there, brush is there. It doesn't kill it right away. It kind of stresses that plant. So you bring the goats back, they eat it again, and it killed it. Over a period of time, you kill that vegetation because you've stressed it out. One of the benefits of this is that it saves a lot on people having to do that work. It saves time in not having to clear it. It also saves chemical. What we're seeing right now is a lot of people are trying to clear buckthorn by going in and cutting it and treating it with chemical, which I've done a lot of that myself. I think goats are a better way to do it. So we're using goats that way. I have a few pictures here to share. This one is one of the sites that I had my goats on this year. This is what we started with. The property owner really just wanted it to be cleared out one time so they could kind of get in there and manage it after that. So this is the before. Here's the after. They ate on that site for about 2 weeks, and it goes a lot farther back into kind of to the right there where it gets shadowy. It goes way back in there. So they cleared, I'm not very good at estimating areas. I would say maybe about a half an acre in 2 weeks. I had 8 goats on that site. So they can make a big difference in a short period of time. So how it works in terms of bringing goats into a site like that is you would work with whoever the property owner is, see what their goals are, what they want to achieve, what area you're going to cover. Then you come in and set up a fence. Then you come back and check on them every day, take care of things, make sure they have water, make sure they have mineral, make sure everybody's healthy and things are as they should be. So somebody comes and checks on them every day. This is the fencing that I use, and I've interacted with a lot of other people who are doing this as a business. This is the sort of the industry standard right there. This is an electric mesh. So all of the horizontal lines are electrified, the uprights, the verticals are not. You train your goats to this, and the goats learn that it's hot, and they learn that they don't want to touch it. And so that's how it works. So you set the fence up, put the goats inside, electrify it, and then the goats go right to work. What I have right now, I've got 12 goats. I'm moving them around this summer to different sites. We're going to move this weekend to our 4th site for the year. So sometimes all the goats go, sometimes a few of the goats go. It depends on the site. But I think in terms of demand within city limits, I've certainly seen a demand. I have people asking for them to come, and I also look around the city and I see a lot of city properties where we could use goats to clear some things out. That includes maybe along the Riverwalk. I talked to Scott about maybe use them to clear out sites that are going to be developed so we can sort of clear it out and then go in there and do final clearing. So one of the sites, what was this site? So what they're gonna do is the goats went in, cleared everything that was really dense, and then the property owner's gonna go in and cut everything down, because it's easier to manage once you can see what's in there. You can move through it. When it's really, really thick like this, it's almost impossible to move through and get anything done. So it clears it out initially, and then if you want to bring goats back for multiple visits, you can do that, or if you just want to see what's there, so you can manage it. So I'd like to invite Tom Kingston up to talk about his property and how he might want to use goats there, and then we'll talk about if that's doable in the city.
Good morning. My property's been discussed before. It's on 1926 Pine Circle in 1930. It's a sloping lot that goes down to the water's edge. It has, part of it's very natural. It has fallen trees, rocks. It's very rugged. So to mechanically get in there with a brush mower is it's aggressive, and it's hard, and it can be dangerous too because of the mechanical. So the goats are natural in that they can move about, and they don't care. They'll stand on top of rocks, jump on logs, stand on logs, they'll move around and mitigate the buckthorn poison ivy and give the natural species a chance to come in. One point I'd mention about the fence is it's electrified, so the goats are trained to it visually, but you don't want to challenge them over a period of time by not electrifying it, because eventually, like other curious beings, they'll go, hey, wait a minute, and then they'll escape. The second thing that's often forgotten is it's a predator protection. So roaming dogs, raccoons, coyotes out where this particular property is, it prevents them from being attracted to the goats. They learn very quickly as well. So it's both a safety for the goats, and it's to keep the goats contained within their property. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, so like Tom said, the electric fence is really twofold. It keeps the goats where they should be, but for me, the most important thing is it keeps the predators out. So here you can see the goats in there doing their thing, and that fence is what's creating that line for them. Just another picture of that. So, so my ask is that there's a recommendation to the council to allow the goats to be used for vegetation purposes within the city, so that you look at that and decide if this is something that we can do within city limits. And the big part of that really at this point is the electric fence. So there's an ordinance against electric fencing in town, so we would like to ask you to look at some exceptions to that, so that we can temporarily bring goats and have them on sites and have the electric fencing to protect them and keep them in place, and then do the job and then remove that fencing. So that's my ask. Any
Thanks, Ken.
questions?
Yeah, first question. So you mentioned the electric fence, but if, aside from the electric fence, would it be allowable to bring in goats temporarily under current ordinance? And then do we need to look at that as well?
Yeah, not in zones other than RA.
Okay, so we would want to look at that as well. And this is temporary. You mentioned that particular site was 2 weeks. Is that typical?
It depends on the size of the
Sure,
site.
of
Bigger
course.
sites would be bigger. I would say a site, if you're familiar at all with Tom's, would be a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. And we're certainly not looking at putting these in small residential, in yards right in town where they're just a small area. It would be in the less common areas in town where they have bigger properties, bigger areas.
Sure. Scott?
When you are working on an area that has waterfront, does the fencing have to extend across the waterfront, or can you go down to the water and leave the waterfront open? How does that work?
Really good question. I know that some of the other folks I've talked to who are doing this, they just run the fence down to the water, and that would certainly keep the goats in, because goats do not like water. Like, they're very dainty. They don't want their feet wet. But I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that. So in all the cases that I've done so far, I have run the fence all the way around for protection for the goats. So if it's possible to run it all the way around, I would do that. That would be my preference.
Do other cities, if we looked at, do other cities have like I'm assuming it's a temporary, like you get a permit to come in and use goats as a natural,
Yeah, I know this is being done in a lot of towns and cities in Minnesota. The ones I'm familiar with are Glenwood is doing it. They're getting goats from Lakeside Farms at Barrett. Glenwood, Albert Lee, I believe that Detroit Lakes is doing it. I know it's happening in the Twin Cities. Faribault, there's a young man down in Faribault that's running 600 goats. So he's got them all over the place. So this is getting to be a very popular way to control brush.
so if we were to look at this, we would look at changing an ordinance to have a, I'm sure there's other ordinances out there for other cities that would allow temporary use of goats with electric fence to come in and control brush.
Yes.
I'm sure that it's something that's kind of specialized, right? Like you have goats, you've done this. Not everyone is. We're not just going to be start letting goats roam the streets, right? That's not the purpose. But so would we just ask staff to bring a sample ordinance for us to consider? Is that something that's acceptable? That's there's other communities out there doing it.
Your Honor, I agree with the staff, but I also think that we should probably give it some time to get some reaction back from the citizens because, of course, this is something that we've never occurred before or whatever, however you want to call it. So I would like to put it off for at least, not next meeting, but I mean, at least maybe into sometime into September or October to hear some input.
I mean, it would seem to me if we go through the natural process of bringing a sample ordinance consideration, there'll
Okay,
be
I
plenty of
just-
time for
Okay.
the public to comment. I mean, that would be my thought, but and of course we can slow it down at any time, or not pass it if we don't feel like there's enough. But I would think that the natural process, bureaucracy takes long enough.
Right.
We just let
Yep.
that play out, and the public has a chance to.
I think it'll get a headline in the Daily Journal and the radio anyway.
In
So-
fact, it's for a creative headline, so I'll let James come up with that,
But-
whatever that headline is.
But I think having, when we lived on Williams, we had buckthorn, up the wazoo, and obviously buckthorn is an invasive species, and as Terry says, there's plenty of we do a trail, and we allow somebody like on the Kingston property, and maybe a city property, and we see how it goes. That it's. I mean, I think it's a positive thing, as Terry said. If you can remove, I spent hours removing buckthorn, and it's a positive thing to get rid of because it kills a lot of the good trees around. Once you get buckthorn, it's very, very difficult to get rid of it.
You mentioned down by the river.
Yeah.
We've spent hours and hours and hours at times
Yep.
trying to clear that for a view, and it's just the view of the river is beautiful. It brings
Yep.
the river back.
Yeah.
But man hour and chemicals and machinery, it's expensive. It's so I'm all in favor of it if it's done in a way that's reasonable to the neighboring property owners, of course. Yeah.
I have two questions. One, is this kind of a seasonal activity? When the leaves fall off, the stuff is done, so it'd be kind of a summer season only, or is it?
It is, and into the fall. You can do this into the fall, especially if buckthorn is the biggest target because buckthorn holds its leaves and stays green longer than anything else in the fall. So it's a good point. It starts, I'm not really sure. This year we started in May. So some years if it greens up earlier than that, you could start earlier, but probably May through October.
Awesome.
And they also are very good at, they sort of target the berries on the buckthorn. And so there's new research out that shows that the berries are viable really for the first 1 or 2 years. They are viable longer than that, but if you control them for that first 1 or 2 years, you can really start making a dent in eradicating buckthorn in an area. And so the goats eat the berries, and because of the way their stomachs work, they're ruminants like a cow. And so when the seeds go through their system, when they come out the other end, they're not viable anymore. Like a very tiny percent of them are viable. So you're getting rid of that seed source.
That was a nice way of, very nice way of putting
Second
it.
question. I got one more question. Your
Yeah,
Honor.
Andrew, go ahead.
The biggest concern I think staff has is the electric fence, right? It's not the goats. That doesn't pose any problems in our mind. I'm wondering if it's feasible or practical to have another fence outside of the electric fence, because my biggest concern, quite frankly, is kids. If we're doing this in city parks or anywhere near neighborhoods, just kids are kids, right? And curiosity, and if they see goats, they're going to go towards the goats. And So I'm just wondering if it's practical to have a fence outside the electric fence to add that extra layer of protection, because that's really, in my mind, the only barrier to making this a successful program.
Yep. I think you're right that kids are curious and that that's a concern, and we can put up signage, and if they're not reading the signage or too young to read the signage, then a second fence is a way to do that. It could be a fence just like this, which would be frankly expensive to have twice the fence, but there are other ways to do it, right? You could put up more of a, this is temporary, but like
Snow fence.
flagging, snow fence, something that would be more visible and easy to set up. I think it's doable.
Okay, I think that would ease a lot of our concerns. I just don't want somebody to stumble upon and, get the shock, because as a parent of an almost 3-year-old, the curiosity is there, and
Yep.
of course couldn't read a sign, but would be beeline into those goats and
Yes.
hand in the fence and.
Well, they'd only touch it once, and I'd imagine that word would spread pretty
I grew up on a
quickly.
farm.
Are you talking about you or the 3-year-old?
I probably still am a 3-year-old at times. I would touch the fence.
But it's, not to diminish the concern about kids and everything, but it is low voltage, and it is something that's not, it's not
It is.
dangerous to human beings.
I have to say that there is one case, like in the world, on the books, where a toddler crawled across wet grass, like it was the perfect bad conditions, right? And contacted the fence, and it was fatal. But it is, all of us could walk up and touch that fence on any given day, and it's gonna go zap, and it's gonna hurt, which is true for kids as well. But the reality is there is one case on the books where it was a tragedy. But we could certainly put up second fencing and do a lot of, I think, reaching out to the landowners adjacent and in the neighborhood and let people know, and take all precautions to make sure we're safe.
That was the other thought, Your Honor, that when we talked internally, our chicken ordinance, you have to get consent of your neighboring properties. We thought maybe it's something similar to that, just for the simple fact that it would require the notification, right?
Yep.
Everybody would be aware that this fence is coming into their neighborhood, and watch your kids, right? There's the responsibility of parents as well.
Yep.
So if there's things like that require a notification, I think that's always a good thing too.
Would it make sense to have a motion to have staff bring us an ordinance for consideration that we could talk through and have public input on? Would someone like to
I'd
make
like to
that
offer that.
motion?
How about that?
Anthony? Scott second, go ahead, you had a question too, Scott.
I was going to offer the motion, but that's
Oh,
how we
thank
did it. Directing staff to research the issues and bring back a report and possibly a model ordinance, something to that effect. I think we've kind of hit around it, but one of the benefits to this, I think, actually would be not just to this people in the city, but to the city itself. I think, as you suggested, possibly doing a test or being able to use this service in our park areas and other areas that the city has. I think it could be a real advantage for us. And so if it meant, having to try to work with you on whatever it took to make the fencing and signage and things like that safe so that we can prove it, so to speak, it would be, I think, a good move on the city's part to investigate this. But allowing the staff some time, as Scott Rachel suggested, to look into this and come back. I don't know that we have any deadline. I don't think you've got any appointments in town before the end of October.
I do not.
So we've got some time to work through this and come back with a reasonable ordinance, and possibly by next spring, you could be in business here.
Sounds great, thanks, Scott. Yeah, Al?
Just to comment too, do you carry like an insurance on your goats and things like that if they do get out? Because I've got a friend who has probably 80 horses. And, it's a little tricky with that. He carries a policy. If they get out, somebody hits it with a car, and there's a nasty accident, then he's covered for that. Is there anything that you carry on yours, or if your goat gets out, eats something of the neighbors that's 100-year-old, heirloom plant and that sort of thing?
Right, good question. And so I have coverage currently that covers them under my farm, and I'm looking into getting coverage that covers them as a business.
Okay.
So it's something that I'm definitely moving forward on.
Also, too, this would probably be a better question for somebody here in the city as far as what would you guys, or what would you estimate that would be goat-worthy percentage of the brush in town that would need to be taken care of? Because I think if it's that bad, and if it's not city-owned, or if it's privately owned, they're going to get a ordinance violation or a code violation on their property, since it's a weed or a noxious plant or something like that. I know there's been a lot of that going on this summer with the drought and all the weeds popping up. I guess I don't know what the percentage even would be.
I don't know percentage-wise, but we certainly have some wild areas, broken down dam along the river at Wright Park. A lot of areas that are heavily infested with the buckthorn.
And the other question I have too is I think that, is there an ordinance now that you're not supposed to feed the geese in town? Is that correct?
Not an ordinance.
Or just not supposed to?
Just an initiative from the
Okay.
Natural Resources Committee.
Is it because they carry E. coli or spread E. coli? Is that one of the reasons?
Reason that's being put out there is that it's unhealthy for the geese and for the ducks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because once I heard it was E. coli or something like that that was being spread. And I don't know, do goats, do their droppings spread anything, or what's done with that after the fact?
That's just free fertilizer.
Okay,
No charge.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Tom. So we have a motion to ask staff to research this and bring back a sample ordinance for consideration and public discussion. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. Last item on the agenda that I'm aware of is vacant property registration, and we'll call on April Zumach. Good morning, April.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, council members. This is just a request to work with our city attorney to draft an ordinance for vacant properties in our community. There's a lot of resources being spent on vacant residents in our community that have either gone into forfeiture, foreclosure, have just become abandoned. We also have commercial buildings too, where we're spending a lot of resources on mowing, cleaning up garbage, weed control. And what the intent of this ordinance is to make the property owner responsible and let the city know what their plans are for this property. I'm just gonna kind of talk to residential properties. When we get a property that has been vacant for some time, say several years, it's bought, we're finding that we have to approach them about building permits, making sure that it's habitable, getting new certificate of occupancies. And unfortunately, we're the bearer of bad news of saying, hey, you need to do this to a minimum code standard to make your house habitable. Or so the hope of this ordinance is that we know where these properties are at, that they are registered, that the owners have to provide a property plan of whether or not electrical has to be upgraded, plumbing needs to be repaired, gas lines need to be replaced. The same with commercial buildings. Are there structural issues? Are there fire suppression systems that need to be maintained? Who is a contact? Does council have any questions? You know, it was looked at back in 2009 with our city attorney. There is a draft enclosed, and that was the copy of the ordinance that was drafted back in 2009.
Thanks, April. Questions for, it would seem, would we have a problem, like if buildings go vacant, are most owners just, kind of out of the picture, if you will, or?
It becomes kind of out of sight, out of mind. So then the city has to reach out to them. And a lot of times they're not from our area or have a local representative for the property, or they're being looked at, and there's just a lot of information about that property. I'm going to pick on the city here a little bit. If somebody was come to us for, say, the wastewater treatment plant that just Brian proposed, is we have a plan, we've done our due diligence, we know environmentals, we know the engineering requirements for that property. This is just, would require the same of those that own those properties, whether it's residential or commercial.
Scott?
I'd like to bring that, or make the motion to bring it to the council, but I think it's a
Just
good
second
thing to
real
have a
quick.
I'm sorry.
Someone
I'm
give
sorry.
a second real
I'll
quick?
second that.
Thanks.
I think it's a good thing to have the communication part of it, because I think it's really hard on a a lot of the buildings, they're not here. And so you got to really search out to find who you talk to, or you can probably find out who owns it, but who you talk to and have to talk to. So I think it's a good idea, and I think it's something we need to look at.
And ultimately, I assume it'll give us legal standing to get something done with a property if they are truly disengaged with that property.
Well, if we make the residents hold to a rule, we should make the commercial people too, so.
Scott?
On the one hand, it seems that we've already got various rules and laws about maintaining a property, so if there's some code violation or if there's some dilapidated condition that needs to be addressed, I mean, we would already have the ability to address those things without this registration in place. So to what degree does having this registration create an advantage for us beyond what we've already got in place?
So what the hope or the intent of the ordinance would be that we're getting, before it's vacated or when it is vacated, that we get those contacts in place and an agreement from those owners saying that they understand what are rules and requirements. Because a lot of times, like Scott alluded to, it is where we spend a lot of time and energy and resources trying to find out who the actual owner is, who the citable party is, and then leaving cost against the property. So say we've had a property that's been vacant for 2 years and nothing's been done with it, and the city is almost acting like a manager for this property. So in essence, it's similar to the rental property. We have somebody to reach out to, somebody that's responsible for it. You know, it's an educational piece as well.
The other side of that is it incentivizes people to do something with the property sooner than later. A lot of times it's easy to just say, I'll get to that when I get to it, and years start ticking by, and you know, there's no cost involved with holding it or whatever. And this, you know, there's a fee to have the vacant building, and part of the thought is maybe that incentivizes somebody to say, rather than pay this fee to let that house sit empty year after year, it'll, you know, maybe it's time I sell it, or actually pull the plug, or, you know, do the project I've been talking about doing for 5 years, kind of thing. So there's a little bit of an incentive in there to get it off the vacant registry list as well.
As the fee was listed in here, $100 a unit or whatever it would be, is that an annual fee then, the way you see it, or is it a one-time thing and you're registered for as long as it remains vacant, or how would that fee specifically then be applied?
That would be part of the vetting process here of finding out what the council is willing to support. If we want to do an annual fee, or if we want to just do a one-time and we have it registered.
Were these fees from 2009 that are in the packet?
They are.
Yeah, so they'd be probably different today.
Are a number of these homes inherited? They're in wills, so people own them and they don't live here?
It can be a varying thing. So when it comes to residential, it can be they were an only child, inherited it, they're the last of kin on that property. Now they're in a nursing home, or it's held in a trust, or so that aspect of finding out who has it, it may go to a nursing home, and being able to have any correspondence with the actual person that owns it, just getting to their legal representation. I know when it comes to commercial businesses, LLCs are a little tricky to find out who the actual responsible party is for that property. I'm just thinking of some properties on Western Avenue that we've had that issue with.
So if we have to go in and mow these properties, who do we bill?
We send it to the last known address of record with Ottertail County, and then it gets liened against the property.
Your Honor.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get, like, I mean, how big a problem is this in like, how many houses are we talking about, and how many commercial buildings are we talking about? I mean, you know, I mean, the one commercial I think of at the moment is like the old Pizza Hut. I mean, it's kind of the weeds, but it's more thistles than it is grass anymore. Ideal opportunity for goat mowing, and but.
They don't like pizza.
But I mean, we know who that is. I mean, my concern about it is like, is there any teeth in this ordinance, in the sense of like we create this ordinance, somebody, if they don't register now or they don't care about the property, what makes us think they're gonna come to the city and pay $100 and register a vacant property? You know, I mean, there's no, I'm not sure that I see that there's an incentive for them to register unless there's some real penalty if they don't, or if they let the property, fall into rack and ruin. I mean, if they're sitting on a $40, $50, $100, $200,000 property and they can just let it sit there and pay the property taxes on it, why are they going to pay $100 to register it? Or $200 or whatever the fee is? If they don't care about the property, why are they, well, I don't see them coming to the city.
I was kind of had a similar thought. Is it almost, well, as we go through the discussion of this, if we do draft an ordinance, which we have a motion to do, but
Yeah.
is it almost creating a disincentive? Because if you're trying to find some of these that are absentee and they realize they're gonna have to pay $100, it almost seems like some people might be less apt to come forward and work with the city. But anyway, I kind of had a similar thought, but Scott?
Well, along those lines, I think that, creating a disincentive is very likely the case. Would this, as you see it, only apply to buildings or lots with buildings, or could it also be applied to vacant lots? Because we've got, similar issues then with vacant lots being left to go to pretty ugly situations too. Again, the goats, but it seems like it could apply either way, but as Anthony said, if they're not even wanting to maintain what they've got, why would they come forward? But I think the advantage to the city would be just knowing the plan. And so if there was a way to incentivize a vacant property for the people to at least tell us what their plan is, so that we've got some idea, what hope there is for something improving, that'd be great. But I don't think someone's going to pay to tell you their plan. There'd have to almost be a bonus to get them to come in. So I don't know how you approach that, but that's where I see a real puzzlement here.
We would, Your Honor, we would cite, if people failed to register, it's no different than registering a rental property. If you fail to register, you're gonna get cited with a misdemeanor and you're gonna end up in court. So we're gonna, it's creating a legal requirement that if you have a vacant property in town, you must register. It's not, please come forward. We
Okay.
would send a code violation charge to the property address, and if they don't show up in court with a warrant, then you get a warrant, and then they'll resolve it real quickly if it turns into that kind of an issue. So it's a legal issue. If we create this ordinance, we're creating a legal requirement, just like rental registration programs or other programs where you're required to be licensed in the city. If you don't comply, there's a penalty for that. So it's not asking, please come along and donate $100 to us. It's saying, if you're going to have a vacant property in our community, this is the requirements to have such, with the goal of ensuring that properties don't become vacant and fall into disrepair, and that we have contact for people that have those properties that are already in disrepair. So, there's going to be teeth to this because it is a legal requirement, and we certainly today, if we find a we're not going to know everything on day one, but if we find a property today that's a rental property that's not in the program, if they don't join the program upon us telling them they have to, they're sent a citation, and if you don't address it at that point, you end up in court. So it's not a voluntary thing that we're just suggesting if we go down this road. So I just want everybody to be clear that this would be a legal requirement that would have some teeth to it.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think there's lots of good discussion. I'm sure we'll be able to continue that discussion as it moves forward, right? It's a process, and there's a motion to bring it to the council on Monday night. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, April.
April, don't leave. I got some questions for you after the meeting.
Unless there's anything else to come before the council after the meeting starts now.